As a heads up, this entire video is optional, but I like the way it cuts down my controller method code even further. So we're going to enable and configure the ViewResponseListener, and this is going to allow us to simply return a view instance from our controller methods. And whilst we haven't enabled this configuration yet, I'm going to start by removing the call to this handle view and instead simply return this view. Our call to handle view will become implied. Now please note that in order for this to work, you will need to have run Composer Require Sensio Framework Extra Bundle, or simply Composer Require Annotation. Now I did say in the setup video that the Sensio Framework Extra Bundle was listed as an optional dependency. It is mandatory if you want this feature. So let's now enable the ViewResponseListener. This is a very easy change to make. We just need to jump into our FOSREST YAML file and under the view key, add the ViewResponseListener and either just pass in true or set enabled to be true. And that's it. We can now just return either calls to this view or new view objects directly. So we can now validate this by sending in that same test that was just failing a moment ago, and this time we get a pass. Now in the post action of our album controller, we don't just return a view at the very end of the method, we also do return a view if our form is considered to be invalid, so we can make that update as well. But note that you can use both in the same controller method. As ever though, stick to one, it makes your life easier and your code easier to reason about. Now it's actually possible to take this one step further and just return data. We can explicitly tell FOSRESTBundle to force wrapping anything that we return in a view. Now I've added this configuration in here, but I'm going to start by commenting it out to see what happens if we try and just return data without this setting enabled. In making this change to the return statement, I'm going to have to get rid of the explicit response code. Now this isn't going to make an immediate difference anyway, as the problem that we're about to run into is that we've just returned an array, and any of our controller methods need to return a response object. Now you may be confused here and thinking, weren't we just talking about views and now you're talking about responses? Well, the view is FOSRESTBundle's wrapper around building the response. Once we force FOSRESTBundle to wrap any return statement in a view, then our test still fails. And that's because we're expecting to get back a 201 or a created status code, and instead we're getting back a 200, a status OK. So for me, I prefer to work with the this view approach. The nice part being that the view method call takes the optional second and third arguments, the second argument being the status code, and the third argument being any headers that you need to set. Now being completely honest here, for a long while what I used to do is return the form object if the form submission failed or the data was invalid, and then a JSON response if everything went to plan. The thing is here we're returning two different types, and for me this feels a bit weird. It's not a practice that has actually served me very well over the years. If we return a single type, so just a view instance, then this standardizes and leads to code that's probably, in my opinion, easier to reason about. Now, admittedly, on this last issue, it's a bit of a moot point, as nothing should be directly consuming our controller methods. We're returning JSON. Our front-end consumers work with that JSON. They should never need to directly call our post action, for example. But generally, as far as programming practices go, this approach of returning a single type is something I prefer, if at all possible.